My background is I was trained in undergraduate and medical school at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. And when I finished, I went to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I did my residency there. I did 2 years at the NIH at the National Heart.
I went there.
What?
For internal medicine.
Where?
In Chapel Hill and Wilmington.
Oh, really?
Yes.
At Wilmington, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Well, I was at UNC in Chapel Hill.
Then I went to UVA for HEMOG.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Well, I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for 20 years, from 1978 to 1998. The 2 years I spent at the National Heart Institute, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. I did the surgery branch there, and I did 2 years of cardiac surgery. And then I came back, and I was hired as a new attending. And when I was hired, I was hired as a specialist in trauma and critical care, and also to work on computers. I did a lot of computer analysis and things like that. So my boss said, when I was being hired, my intake interview, he says, Bob, we need you to help out doing the weight loss surgery, the big open incision, the vertical banded gastroplasty, and the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. Okay? And I said, well, I don't want to do that. Because, everybody knows if you're heavy, all you have to do is eat less and exercise more. Anyways, my boss said, well, do you want the job? I said, well, now that you mention it, I've always been interested in weight loss surgery. Thank you. So for many years, I did the old kind of open weight loss surgery. And I have to say, compared to my trauma patients, my weight loss surgery patients were nicer, a lot of times more intelligent, more friendly. The trauma patients, this is kind of a secret, but a lot of people who get shot anyways, so I really started to enjoy it, and then a revolution began in American surgery in around 1988. And that was the development of laparoscopic gallbladder surgery. And I was an early adopter of the laparoscopic gallbladder surgery at UNC. Really liked it, and then started doing a lot of other laparoscopic surgery, colon surgery for trauma patients and different things, laparoscopic exploratory laparotomies and things. And so during the period from 1988 to 1997, that roughly 10-year period, I kept thinking there must be a way to use these laparoscopic techniques in my weight loss surgery patients, because the incision was such a morbid insult to patients because they had infections, and Nancy was talking about that too, her experience of seeing infected Roux-en-Y patients in the ICU. And so around at the beginning of 1997, I observed some of the first laparoscopic Roux-en-Y gastric bypasses being done in the country, and I started to do them at UNC with kind of mixed feelings about it. There were some issues with the Roux-en-Y. I don't like the additional connection, the anastomosis up high near the esophagus. These are all, in my opinion, kind of very complicated parts of it that make it dangerous, make it almost impossible to safely revise it. So one night I was actually on call for trauma, and a guy was selling drugs in downtown Durham, North Carolina. He had a disagreement with one of his customers on pricing, and he was shot 7 times in the belly with a .357 Magnum. So about 9 o'clock, I got him into the OR, and he was shot multiple times. I took out several pieces of small bowel, the tail of his pancreas and the spleen, and the bottom of his stomach. So I hooked his stomach back to the bowel with a Billroth 2 end-to-side connection, and that should sound familiar. That's what a mini gastric bypass is. So about 3 in the morning, I got him up to the intensive care unit, and the next day I had a patient who was scheduled for a laparoscopic Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, and she's a nurse and a friend of mine, and I said, gee, I think instead of doing this Roux-en-Y, we ought to just do a Billroth 2 like I just did on the trauma patient. And she says, yeah, that's a good idea. I've done lots of those. We used to do them all the time for ulcer disease. They were called a vagotomy and antrectomy with a Billroth 2. Shouldn't say yes, that means that you and I are kind of old. And so we did. In her case, she did great. And we did 65 more cases there at UNC. I was a full professor of surgery. I was the associate chief of staff. I was the director of the North Carolina Trauma Registry. I'd written the American College of Surgeons' first version of their trauma registry, and I quit my job just to do this. And that's now 11 years ago, almost 5,000 patients. And we're seeing around the world people are beginning to adopt the MGB. And America, the surgeons are still a little resistant to it, but
They
we
don't
think
like you much.
no, I know, and that they're grumpy about it. They think, oh well, he must be fibbing on the results, or. But the nice thing is now, for example, in France, and Spain, and England, and Austria, and Lebanon, India, Hong Kong, Australia, Taiwan, they're all doing it and having equally good results. So sometimes it takes a while for the United States to catch up. So that's my story.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we were talking about seeing me on the website and talking to Bud. And you've been in this clinic this morning. Are you okay with the clinic and being in kind of public like this? And are seeing the patients from last week, is that at all helpful? Or good?
I've seen a lot of them on your little video clips.
That's true, right? Well, those videos, they're kind of flaky. I mean, they're very amateurish, but are they? I think people say they're helpful. Okay. Questions left over that you have for me? Anything that we can answer or talk about in your case that?
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Don't hesitate to chime in. Okay, we're happy to have you here. I hope you'll tell Bud thank you and hey. Good morning.
Good morning.
You want to say hi?
Hello, how are you?
Good.
I'm really impressed.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I seen the results every day, and I've known Dr. Karna when he was 110 pounds heavier, and I've seen tremendous improvement, absolutely tremendous. I cannot even explain that. And I have full and complete confidence. I research a lot. I spend so much time on your website. I've seen the only thing was like the surgery itself is like.
You're not watching that?
But now I'm okay with it.
Good, okay. You saw the animation. What do you think of the little, does that help explain it?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And I'm so excited. I cannot wait. My
Good.
surgery is reserved on Thursday.
Good.
And I'm looking forward to seeing them.
Any questions that haven't been answered? You were in the clinic kind of last week. Anything that we should talk about that you and I ought to go over for you specially that you can think of for today?
Pretty much you have everything
Okay.
written down.
And you saw the patients from last week?
Yes, and
Okay.
they look healthy and very impressive.
I think one of the things I would say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you looked at that group and then looked at you all, it'd be hard to tell which ones were pre-op and post-op until they kind of lift up. And I think that's a good measure of how well we do.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we're certainly happy to be here, that you're here, and don't hesitate to chime in if you have other questions, anything at all that we can answer for you.
That's what I love. Your staff and yourself always available.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
even sometimes 1 o'clock at night, I go and I email and everything's fine. Like I have responded within a couple of hours, no problem.
Great.
So,
Welcome back.
Hello?
And have you been in any air conditioning ducts since we last talked?
No.
Okay, good.
No, but I do have a cold I've been getting over, so I hope that
Uh-oh.
I don't get pushed back.
Tell us about it.
It's just a little cough and some sniffles.
And how many days ago did you start?
5.
And you think you're starting to get improved?
Yeah.
Are you coughing up any junk?
No.
Fever?
No.
Okay. And when's your surgery?
Tomorrow.
Okay, well, we'll see you tomorrow. There's a possibility. You know, we don't want to go through the surgery if you're not feeling well. But if you have just a little minor, we'll discuss it with anesthesiology and decide. Sounds like it'd be okay, but...
I'm ready. I don't want to push it off.
Well, we know that. I've actually done this with other patients in the past, and I know that I'll have to stay arm's length away from you if I postpone your case. I'll tell you one story. I had a patient, it's been almost 10 years since her surgery, and I just talked to her not long ago. She's doing terrific. But during the surgery, we looked down in her pelvis, and we saw a great big ovarian mass. And so we called a gynecologist to come look. And we've had one other where the gynecologist said, I think it looks like it's a benign mass. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. But in this case, the gynecologist said, I'm not sure. And I said, okay, we'll cancel the surgery. So I had to wake this lady up and tell her two things. One, that she might have ovarian cancer. And two, that I didn't do her surgery. Okay, which thing bothered her?
She
wasn't cancer, I don't care. But I'm going to kill you. But yeah, so I understand the importance of going ahead, but your health and well-being is your number one priority, and we won't get confused about that tomorrow. So we'll look at your cold and see how you're doing. Now, you've been to the other clinic last week.
which was very informative.
Was that okay? You're okay with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Well, questions that you have for us? Anything left over? Who's here with you? Can I get introduced?
This is my husband, Carl.
Hey, Carl.
I was also a little under the weather and getting over it, so we had a little rough last week here. So the only couple things I was actually what you explained in the beginning with the vitamins, because